And I'm happy to invite our first panel for the day, moderated by Yael Elbaz, Senior Director of Compliance at Rapyd. Yael, thank you. We can start coming up as I'm speaking. Alana Herbst, Financial Crimes Team Manager at EverC. Omri Brinner, Counter-Terror Financing Consultant Omri Brinner, and Nevo Lapidot, Founder and CEO of FRNZX.
Good morning, everyone. I'm super excited to open the first panel here in the FraudCon, and apologizing Nevo. Nevo had a call to reserve duty, so our thought and praise with him. And I told him that I will represent his solution moving forward during this conversation, so apologizing on behalf of Nevo. And thank you, Alana and Omri, joining me this morning. And we are going to discuss today actually what we are not doing enough by countering terror financing. And I would like to open our panel by introducing a publication of the US Justice Department from January this year that actually offer a prize up to $10 million by getting information on disruptions of financial intelligence or financial actions done by financial institutions. Can you elaborate a little bit more, Omri, why you think they took this strategy going to the financial institution sector?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Yael. Yes, so the US call for cooperation for intelligence is exactly what it is. It's a call for cooperation. And it goes to show that even state agencies, strong state agencies with good intelligence and good capabilities, and obviously good money to give away or to invest in this, need everyone to collaborate. They need cooperation. And it's really important to say that without cooperation, and that's the underlying message of what I'm saying now, the fight against terror financing will not be very successful. So that's a really important point to put out. We have to collaborate. Shlomit just spoke about a collaboration on the state level that Israel has to have partners around the world in its fight against terror financing to Hamas, for example. And she keeps saying that, and she keeps saying that in her lectures, and she's right to do so. But the fact that it's a recurring message is also a sign that there's still a big gap there. So there's a call for cooperation by the U.S. state agency, also from people like Shlomit, which is really, really important. Now, cooperation happens on three levels. On the public-public, on the public-private, and on the private-private. On the public-public, it's at a state level, so I won't go too deep into that. But there is one message I do want to get across. Think of terror financing like global warming. It's a cross-border phenomena, right? You can do all that you want, all that you can against terror financing in your own platform, but if it happens elsewhere, it will come to you as well, right? So if one country fights global warming, gives it all, the rising sea levels won't stop at its borders. It will be impacted as well. Then we go to the public-private. And there we see shortcomings on both ends. From the public point of view, there aren't enough incentives for payment companies to cooperate, right? So both carrots and sticks. Let's say that there is a designation being published by the state. If a company is able to, within a month, close the account of the designated entity and all the terror-related accounts associated with it, and it provides information to the state about these accounts, listen to this crazy, innovative idea, it gets money from the state. So just like the Americans are calling for. And if it fails, it gets fined. But the public sector isn't providing incentives, not carrots and not sticks. And then there's the private sector, which doesn't really provide information to the state, right? Because too often, private companies close terror-related accounts on other grounds, money laundering grounds and all sorts of other reasons, because sometimes there's just no smoking gun, a proof that this specific account was used for terror financing, even though the person operating this account was designated by Israel or by OFAC. So it's obvious terror-related, but they don't want to be seen as supporting a terror financing on their platform. So when they don't provide information, the state doesn't know that these terrorists are operating on their platform. They don't know who they are, and they can't seize their funds, right? So there's a lack of communication there. Another lack of communication is on the private level, right? So Shlomit showed the WhatsApp group and the Excel, but this is basic, and it was in a state of emergency. On a routine, on a regular basis, there's too little communication where there should be a lot more. If I, as a company, have terror financing in my platform, and as usually is the case, it doesn't happen only with one company, money moves around, I'll be closing these accounts, but I won't be reporting them to the other company because I don't want to share data or I don't want to give away anything. But sharing data on bad actors is a good thing, especially when it's being done in a legal and constructed manner, right? There has to be more communication between companies. And think about data information, sharing data is a two-way street, right? You give information and you get information. So just imagine as a payment company, you get information about terror financing on your platform that you weren't even aware of. But all of a sudden, now you have a much, much fuller picture.
And you actually did a research on how financial institutions are being abused for terror financing. So can you share with us shortly your insights?
Yes. So I did a research and I focused on money exchangers in the Gaza Strip. Why money exchangers? Because interestingly enough, money exchangers in the Gaza Strip depend on legitimate activity by ordinary people, right? So they actually go and advertise. Thank you, Gilit. Send me money through this company, send me money through that company, because that's their activity. And it's all out there. It's all out there. So I did a really, really thorough Web-end SOCMINT investigation, did loads of cross-referencing. And what we see here, I think you're seeing by your faces, I think you're seeing the slide. We see several exchange businesses operating through dozens of companies. Yeah, we have one company, one exchange there operating through PayPal and Payoneer and Binance and Perfect Money, if I'm not mistaken. And there we have another one that is operating through all of the above and some more. Western Union never fails to operate. So to disappoint, so it's there, but there's a lack of communication between the companies. I think, yeah, good. So all of these companies have the same terror financiers operating through them, but they're not communicating with one another, and it's too bad. Now, these days I'm working on a facilitation program that would create information sharing. And besides that, there's brilliant solutions out there and brilliant companies like EverC, like LegitScript, like Insight Threat Intelligence. And we're here to help.
Great, thank you. So you ended your insights with technology. So let's touch base a little bit about technology. Hi, Alana.
Hi.
So can you describe to us how technology can assist monitoring this type of typologies? And I think that you have also a very interesting slide to show how you see things with your systems and how you identified some anomalies in transactions. Please.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Alana. So before I get into, I think, kind of the nitty-gritty, I think it's important to take a step back in terms of what we're seeing today and the differences of what Terra Finance looks like today in terms of fundraising, in terms of crowdsourcing, everything that comes with it. So we used to see, and we still do see today, it's important to know that all these phenomenons are not taking turns so much as happening simultaneously within themselves. So we see, really complex infrastructures of Hawala, of trade-based money laundering, exactly as Shlomi said, that are kind of the more typical ways that we've seen terror financing in the past. Now we see that anyone who has access to the internet can become a terror financer, right? So when we think about seeing a campaign online, it could be for anything. It could be for starving children. It could be for someone that has a terminal illness. It could be for their homes. We see these crowdsourcing pledges, and now they're reaching millions and millions of people, more than they ever had the opportunity to do before, and also potentially from anonymous people. So when I start a campaign, I don't necessarily have to give any information of who I am, what organization I'm from, what I'm doing, but I can just launch a campaign today and start getting money. And if my story is compelling enough, you might have people that just see the story online and say, okay, that's something I really want to give to. I relate to this, I see to this, and as part of our movement as a society is more globalization and being global citizens, even if it's something that's not happening in your backyard, you might feel compelled to give. So we're now in a scenario that we've kind of created the perfect storm for ourselves of after COVID, more things happening online, more anonymous entities, and being able to kind of create these spaces in which it happens. So if I went to your average person, I said, hi, do you want to donate money for bombs, for weapons, for terror training, whatever it may be, they might say no. Your students on American campuses might differ, but let's say that most people say no. That's fine, but when you see a cookbook for sale and all the proceeds go to a charity that you identify with, or you see photos of children that are starving and you want to give to these things, you're not necessarily thinking about where these end up or where they go and how they're getting there. You're saying, I see something, it's all in our world very instantaneous, as we know. I want to feel self-gratitude immediately. I can donate, and I don't really have to feel responsibility for where things go and how things end. So the responsibility of also where the terror financing on has kind of spread to greater society based on our circumstances. So now that we're all kind of in this situation together, it's on our part to do our due diligence and ensure that when we're thinking about humanity as a greater toll, when we're giving to it, that we're giving to it responsibly and thinking about how we do that. So multiple ways that we can do it in terms of the technology that we're looking at are when we're going into these campaigns, of course, transaction monitoring. So financial institutions, payment providers really are processing the vast majority of our payments. And when we're looking at this, we see that they're mostly on the front lines of defense in terms of what we would see as potential suspicious transactions. That means that we also have critical data and analysis that we're able to get in real time. And that real time part is really important in terms of our collaboration and our cross-border, everything that we would like to do, because we're able to see it and actually get it in that time before it closes down. So a lot of times when we're passing things on, when we're doing big investigations, when we're moving forward through government entities, things are a little slower. The fintech world has the ability to be more agile, to be a little more flexible, to have our tech innovations that we come with it. So with all of our data, we should also be doing merchant monitoring, really intense merchant monitoring that includes customized rules of how we want to be looking at these. So things don't just appear once, but they appear throughout our lives of how we can understand and track and trend and pattern and relate to all of them as we go on through time. This includes, of course, behavior analysis. As we do KYB and KYC for all kind of merchants or entities that enter into our platform, we also want to be doing the same thing on social media, on campaigns, on live platforms, everything like that. It should be treated the same way now because they're operating differently, but the goal is often the same. So we need to be thinking about how we're putting all of these things together in the light of not just looking at traditional methods, but methods that are happening today as well.
Great, thank you very much. So we discussed a little bit about the cooperation between regulators or governments with the public sectors, but let's touch base a little bit on the regulatory side. And we talked about innovative tools. Shlomi discussed the new use of crypto by terror organizations, and there are more and more innovative tools that terror organizations are using. On the other hand, regulators are a little bit behind, and this is the understatement, because the first publication by the FATF with regards to crypto assets happened in 2019, way after the crypto hype. So what we are going to do with legislation that is actually postponed, but terror financing is already using innovative tools, how we mitigate this problem?
Well, regulation has to be updated and has to be relevant for what we're talking about. If we're talking about counter-terror financing, the regulation is largely irrelevant. And the reason why the regulation is largely irrelevant, because the regulation targets money laundering. And money laundering and terror financing are not the same thing. They're not one of the same. Money laundering is a typology of terror financing. Terror financing is one context of money laundering. So if you think that you're covered from terror financing because you have good money laundering regulations or controls, then you're absolutely wrong. Yeah, you can be a genius in AML, you can have the best regulations in AML, but it has nothing to do with terror financing. So you'll catch a portion of, because some of terror financing happens through money laundering, but just as much and even more doesn't happen through money laundering. So without the expertise on terror financing, the regulations are irrelevant. Now, what should we do in terms of regulations? The industry, financial payments, payment companies, and the regulators must have a hard conversation about the current regulations, how irrelevant they are. They need to characterize terror financing beyond money laundering, because as I said, you may have the money laundering part covered, but there's loads of other kinds of typologies for terror financing, and to either adjust the old regulations or add new regulations. But going by the same direction that we went thus far, putting money laundering and terror financing together is a recipe for failure.
Thank you. So, Alana, in your work, can you give us example how you differentiate between money laundering and terror financing typologies? What do you see differently in those type of transactions that are related to terror financing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'll start with, saying that oftentimes when people think of terror financing or money laundering, they think of kind of the whack-a-mole game, right? When you're just hitting something and it's popping up in another place. It's actually really not like that, because each hole is something different, and each time you're not hitting it with the same thing. Maybe on one side you're hitting it with a hammer, maybe the next screwdriver, whatever it may be. Each separate thing needs its own tools for what it is, and they might all kind of look the same, but the way that we behave should be different for handling each case. So in terms of when we're looking at money laundering and terror financing, so I do have slides. I'm not sure what you guys see, but I'll assume that you see whatever is supposed to be seen, and I'll just talk through whatever it is. So when we talk about our typical transaction laundering cases, we have someone that's buying something that they might not even know that they're part of this illegal transaction. They might think that they're really buying, let's say, a Gucci bag, or that they're buying their drugs, or whatever it is that they might be buying. They're not aware of it. They also might just be a person who's buying something legitimate. They might be on a gardening store and they really love this orchid and they want to get this orchid home. all sorts of transactions, not just illegal violations, can be illegal transactions. So it doesn't have to start from that place. But let's say now we go through and that transaction is processed by someone else. So that's when we consider it transaction laundering. And that can be happening in a few ways. It could be happening through test transactions. It can be happening through redirects. It can be happening through invoices. It can be happening by speaking to the person that's selling these items actually and saying, hey, what's going on? In the terms of terror financing, we have this kind of another level. So it's absolutely true that they're separate things and they should be looked at as separate, but they do often overlap. So my world is kind of in the overlap area. And when we're looking at it, we often see it through kind of the typical ways that we know terrorism financing happens today, of charities and NGOs and of all these campaigns, which has really become now much more expanded given the current circumstance. So for instance, we have a charity that is raising funds in Gaza. And when we go to make the test transaction, we can see that we're actually redirected to another website for an invoice for a different company. If you look up this company, it's doing retail sale of clothing, and I'm sure people in the crowd know 71 to 75 Shelton Street. It's a big one in our work. That appears there as what we know is already fraud. So we can tell that the actual website that's processing the payment is a front website. This happens over and over and over again. And then it becomes the question of really who's responsible at the end of the day. Not just the people processing it, but when you give to these donations, when you give to these campaigns, when you're thinking about where I want to donate to and how I want to spend my money and be a responsible citizen of the world, we need to think about where these things end up. And the difference of not only in terms of the institutions versus the individual people is that on the people end, a lot of people say, well, I'm going to get my money back. Right, if I make a bad transaction, let's say I order something and it doesn't come. I can ask my credit card for the funds back. And they're not thinking necessarily about the next step and the next step and the next step of where these funds can go to and the effect that they can have on greater society of where do they actually end up, who do they go to, and how they're being used.
Great, thank you. And actually, we discussed a little bit about innovative tools on the financial aspect, but we didn't discuss the new tool that actually terror financing is using, which is the new weapon of social media. So, Omri, you want to share with us a short video?
Yes, there's a short video. Gilit. So this short video you're about to watch is from a Gaza-based exchange company from their TikTok account. And that business and all the businesses that I showed you in the slide earlier, they're all designated by Israel or OFAC or both. And they continue operating. So have a quick watch. Apparently this is what TikTok looks like. I see some of you like the beat. This is a Hamas-related exchange business. I mean, it's as simple as that. And they have ordinary people coming in, exchanging. They advertise their activity online, and that's the main thing. So, assume that a lot of the terror financing will take place on social media platforms. Earlier, we have TikTok. Earlier, Bigo was listed. These are platforms where people can come in, give money in various forms. It can be in crypto, it can be in digital coins and diamonds and all sorts of gaming currencies. But it is possible to stop them. It's not an impossible task. Yeah. Payment companies should scan social media accounts just as they scan any other website. And again, the database is there, the information is there, but you have to, and speaking to the payment companies, you have to come and collect it because I understand that many companies and compliance and risk departments, they don't have the human resources to apply into countering terror financing. But again, we're here. So, and that's what we do. So come and communicate and collect the data and then scan it against those websites, because the information is there. You need to cross-reference 2 words, exchange business and the name of the designated exchange, and you'll come across their social media accounts. That's all you need to do. And yeah, it's not being done yet.
True. And Alana, is it something that you always also see when you look on your monitoring abilities? Do you see a switch to the social media worlds where most of the things are now published there directly or indirectly, but basically moving from the traditional world of financing into the new online abilities? This is something that you also see?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for all the reasons that we've kind of spoken about thus far, of the anonymity that it allows, for the spread that it allows, and the reach that you gain from it, and also just for the instantaneous aspect of it. So today, when we're looking at various things we're finding online, you can just see a post, but I would say that the most important part of these individual posts is to really look into the graph analysis, the link analysis, the network expansion that we're able to do on these items. So one item, when you look at it, doesn't look suspicious, but when you take out the phone number, the email, the company name, the address, whatever could be there, and you start linking exactly as the photo that Shlomi had shown to us earlier of all of the mapping that we saw, most bad activity doesn't exist in a silo, right? There are often networks that support these, and the best way that we can really attack these networks is by understanding them and seeing where we're implicated and seeing its reach. And in terms of, companies that are seeing that they're a part of any part of these networks, my real recommendation to them would be that it's not just a dot in your portfolio, but that it's really a greater problem of where the access is. So in terms of if you're thinking about a fraud ring, so if I now have a front website and I have a multitude of other websites or users on social media, however it is that you want to play it, and I conclude all of them, and I see that only one of them is relevant for my portfolio or is relevant to me and my payment processing, it's not to say that the others aren't. And I think the greater kind of expansion of just closing down and terminating things one at a time rather than understanding the full scale and scope of the problem also needs to be addressed.
Thank you. So last questions for both of you. Wishful thinking. If you are now leading this effort to counter terror financing and you don't have an issue of resources or regulatory problems, what would have you done better?
Well, the first thing I would do better is, to completely reframe the CTF as from an activity point of view, from a regulatory point of view. It's not what we think it is, and it's very, very hard to admit that we've been wrong all this time. For me, it's hard to admit to my wife I've been wrong. So imagine the industry admitting to the world that we've been wrong all this time. So the regulation is not as it should be. So cooperating is the first thing. Then, from a technological point of view, I would say to have a tool that would sync this coordination, the data from this company and the data from that company. It would help everyone, would help the industry, and would help the world by eliminating terror financing or keeping it to the very, very bare minimum, because there'll always be something there. But there's an ocean between where we are today and where we should be. So those are the human element and the technological element.
Thank you, Alana.
I'll say one that might seem obvious in theory, but in practice has seemingly become more difficult. When we make regulations, we should actually abide by them. So that seems very obvious to us, but in a post-October 7th world, you have companies saying, oh, this is over-compliance, oh, our lawyers don't think that we need to do this, oh, we're not sure. And there becomes a lot of gray area and something that doesn't need to be so gray, and that we build the regulations specifically for these moments, and they have no weight unless we utilize them in a real way. So mine would be to actually pursue these areas. And on the other side, I think those of us in the industry have a real responsibility right now to the public, not just to financial institutions, but in terms of our own society, in terms of what we're thinking about how the way things work. And the only way that we can do that is, of course, in forums like this, but also other education, other awareness, and thinking about how your everyday matters can affect the world around you, not always in a positive way. So I think we have a real responsibility in the industry to lead that, and we're in the right place for it at the right time, and it's a good time to do it.
Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us and discussing this so important topic. Thank you both.
Thank you, Yael.
Thank you.